Warm greetings to all our online viewers and participants. I welcome you to our keynote session on unmanned aerial vehicles and unmanned ground vehicle-based mapping. The continuous developments in direct geo-referencing technology and remote sensing systems are providing the professional geospatial community with ever-growing opportunities to generate accurate 3D information with rich set of attributes. These advances are also coupled with improvement in the sensor's performance, reduction in the associated cost, and miniaturization of such sensors. Aside from the sensing systems, we are also enjoying the emerging of promising platforms such as unmanned airborne vehicles and unmanned ground vehicles. To elaborate more on this, I would like to welcome Dr. Ayman Habib. Dr. Ayman Habib is the Thomas A. Page Professor of Civil Engineering at Purdue University and the co-director of the Civil Engineering Center for Applications of Unmanned Aerial Systems for a Sustainable Environment. He is also the Associate Director of Purdue University's Joint Transportation Research Program. Dr. Habib's research interests span the fields of terrestrial and aerial mobile mapping systems. In this regard, he has been focusing on modeling the perspective geometry of non-traditional image scanners, automatic matching and change detection, automatic calibration of low-cost digital cameras, object recognition in imagery and point cloud data, LIDAR mapping, and integrating photogrammetric data with other sensors and data sets. Over the last 4 years, he has been involved in the development, integration, and utilization of wheel-based and UAV-based mobile mapping systems for a wide range of applications in precision agriculture, geometric documentation of transportation corridors, archaeological documentation, crash scene reconstruction, and infrastructure monitoring. Today, he will provide us an overview of the recent activities at Purdue University, focusing on unmanned aerial vehicles and unmanned ground vehicles based mapping, while focusing on algorithmic developments for improved system calibration of multi-sensor and multi-platform UAV-based mapping, applications of UAV-based remote sensing systems for a wide range of applications, including agricultural management, documentation of crash scenes, shoreline monitoring and archaeological documentation, and unmanned ground vehicles for mapping GNSS-denied environments. May I now request Dr. Ayman Habib to please share his knowledge with us.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and good afternoon or good evening, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are. Today, as Ashtamin said, I will be presenting some of the current status and future outlook dealing with unmanned aerial vehicle and unmanned ground vehicle based mapping. So this is just an overview of the talk. I will start talking about mobile mapping systems and how they are impacting the geomatics engineering in terms of the sensing and platform developments, the application domains which are emerging as a result of these developments in the platform and sensing technology. The majority of the talk will be focusing on the utilization of the new mobile mapping systems for what we call multi-modal, multi-platform, multi-scale, and multi-date geospatial data acquisition and integration. So quickly, I'll talk about why we are interested in that and some of the challenges that are related to this integration of geospatial data from a variety of sensors, platforms, at a variety of scales and times as well. So some of these things are the challenges include the integration and the calibration of the system, the mapping in areas where you have some challenge in accessing GNSS signal or positioning signal from global navigation satellite systems, as well as even working in areas where you have complete denial of the GNSS signal. And some of the approaches that can be used to mitigate this challenge and some future outlook when it comes to this mapping in GNSS-denied environment. So there are lots of application, but just the majority of the talk, I will be referring to this high throughput phenotyping for agricultural management, just as a sample of the applications that could benefit from these emerging mobile mapping systems and technologies. So as we all know, geomatics engineering has been mainly a field that is dealing with the production of digital maps using observations or acquisition of the Earth's surface. Right now, with the developments, we have a wider range of applications in geomatics in several fields like environmental monitoring, resource management, infrastructure monitoring, transportation, energy, oil and gas. So we have really a widespread applications of geomatics engineering. And here just I'm mentioning infrastructure monitoring, energy, transportation, and in particular, I will be focusing on some of the application in agricultural management in this talk. So like the reason that we have these emerging, I would say maybe non-traditional applications in geomatics is that we have unprecedented advances in several fronts within the geomatics field. And I would highlight or more or less focus on what we call mobile mapping systems. And there are mainly developments in the sensors and the platforms. So when it comes to the sensors, right now, we have low-cost sensors. They have good performance. They are smaller in size. So we have sensors that imaging sensors, whether they are RGB cameras working on the red, green, blue bands. We have even combinations. We have RGB camera combined with a thermal camera. And we have also multispectral cameras or even these hyperspectral cameras that are working either in the visible and near infrared or the short wave infrared portions of the spectrum. So on the other hand, we have also LIDAR systems like laser ranging and systems. So we have these units that they have ranging accuracy that could be in the range from few millimeters to few centimeters. In addition to that, we have geo-referencing sensors or navigation sensors like integrated global navigation satellite systems and inertial navigation systems. So we have, again, a wide range of GNSS-INS units with a wide range of performance, as well as a wide range of, I would say, weights that go from few grams to maybe a couple of kilograms. So these sensors, their performance is getting better over time, and the cost is getting lower over time as well. On the other front, we have also developments of in the platform. So we have new types of platforms. We have in geomatics, we have been mainly relying on, let me say, spaceborne platforms, manned aircraft or manned airborne platforms, and ground vehicles, like regular vehicles equipped with these different types of sensors. But we have like new platforms like the unmanned aerial vehicles or unmanned aerial systems. We have unmanned ground vehicles and even portable systems or backpack systems. So just a little bit of a step back. What are mobile mapping systems? This is just one of the ways we can define mobile mapping systems, that they are moving platforms. They have different sensors that have been integrated on board. And then as a result of the integration of these sensors, you can derive three-dimensional near continuous position of the platform, as well as objects or whatever geospatial data collected that happen to be within the field of view of the sensors. So whenever we talk about mobile mapping systems, as I mentioned, the traditional ones, I would say airborne and spaceborne systems, we are also quite familiar with wheel-based mobile mapping systems that can be used for transportation applications. And even there are some wheel-based systems which are developed for agricultural application, which I will talk about this later in my talk. So these are the new emerging systems, the unmanned aerial vehicles, the unmanned ground vehicles, and these portable systems. So as it was mentioned in the introduction, I will be mainly focusing on these developments of mobile mapping systems, which are mainly taking place here at Purdue University and the application they are used for. So in essence, what we are trying to do in geomatics or in mobile mapping systems is to take data, acquired data, and then process this data. We do some sort of data analytics or data reduction, and then eventually we end up with knowledge. So when it comes to mobile mapping systems, how we can really go this from the bottom to the top of this pyramid, that first we have to consider the needs of the application at hand, how we can design the mobile mapping system, the sensors that we need to use, their configuration to as much as possible meet the demands or the needs of the application at hand. We do the actual system development, the actual integration of the different sensors. Then you have to do system calibration. You have to start with the data acquisition. You do the modeling, which is basically relating the sensory measurements to the information or to, for example, the coordinates in the object space that you are looking for. You start to develop some products. It's very important to have very well-defined quality control procedures to evaluate the quality of the products from your system. Then you do some analysis of these products. You do some visualization of these products for either for you or for the users, the end users of those data. And then based on the problem at hand, you make some inference or some prediction about the phenomena you are observing. You make a decision. You look at the impact of the decision. You might need to revise the decision, and then you might end up with a decision that the data I have is not really enough, so I need more data with another type of configuration. So the transformation from the data to knowledge is not really just one directional. Each one of these steps here, you can have some feedback into the previous steps, and then you can fine tune your system, whether your design of the system, or even if you're not achieving the accuracy you're looking for, you have to do more effort into the system calibration. So it's bi-directional flow of information, or more or less of data between the bottom and the top of the pyramid. So just to put this talk in focus, my research is mainly focusing on, I would say, the 2/3 of the bottom part of the pyramid, and that's what I will be focusing on in the talk. So just to give you some examples of mobile mapping systems and the diversity of the systems and their application. So that's an example of a wheel-based mobile mapping system we developed here at Purdue. It's a high accuracy unit. So it has a GPS INS unit here in this black box. It has multiple LiDAR units. It has several RGB cameras, two looking forward and one looking backward. This system is mainly developed for transportation corridor management, and we collect data, geo-reference data, with an accuracy at the inch level or 2.5 centimeter level. This is another example of another wheel-based mobile mapping system. It has higher-end LiDAR units, higher-end GPS INS or GNSS INS units, and this is supposed to give us a positional accuracy in the sub-centimeter level, and that's mainly designed for infrastructure monitoring that requires ultra-high accuracy for the geospatial data. You can have the same concept. This is a platform we developed here at Purdue. We call it PhenoRover, and that's mainly based on high clearance tractor. You have a boom, we have LiDAR units, we have hyperspectral camera, we have RGB cameras, as well as a position and orientation unit, GNSS INS unit, and that's mainly developed for agricultural management, more particularly phenotyping applications. This is another example of a system that we recently developed. It's a backpack system. It's based on an LIDAR unit, RGB camera, as well as an integrated GNSS unit. It's used for several applications, including forestry applications, ditch line mapping. And you can even use this one in a cross-platform. So you can take the backpack system and you can easily mount it on the back of the truck, and you have what we call cross-platform mobile mapping systems. You can take the same payload, the GPS, INS, the LiDAR, the camera, and you can mount it on either a remotely controlled car or an unmanned ground vehicle. And you have another platform that you can control to use it for, let's say, ditch line mapping or for in-canopy mapping, as I will be talking in the next few minutes. So one of the things that I did not mention so far actually is that depending on the sensors, the payload, the cost of the sensor will change. So this particular platform here, it's costs roughly like $300,000 plus. This is almost, here we're talking about $500,000. This unit here, it's because of the platform, it's roughly $250,000. This one is $35K, and this here is like $35K. So the major cost, I would say, of all these units is the global navigation satellite system. So for example, this one here is $35K. $25K is in this unit here that provides the direct georeferencing or the position and the orientation of the system. So you can move now to other platforms like unmanned aerial vehicles or unmanned aerial systems. You have lots of, I would say, off-the-shelf system, very low cost in the range of 2K. And these are really can be considered as mobile mapping systems. They have a platform, you have a sensor, it's usually a camera, it could be RGB camera or a thermal camera. You have even some, I would say, consumer grade global navigation satellite system receiver on board. So you have the images geotagged. So you can, depending on your application, some of these platforms could do the job for you. Higher end units, you can buy the UAV, you can customize the UAV, integrate the sensors. For example, you can have either RGB thermal cameras, you can have even LiDAR sensors, and you can put hyperspectral sensors. So depending on the payload, the cost of the system could be in the range of $80K or $80,000 upward. So this is just an example of several UAV platforms equipped, again, with GPS INS. And this is, I would like to emphasize here, the development of the technology. So this system here is like 60 grams, very useful for UAV systems with limited payload. We have an RGB camera here, a thermal camera, a LiDAR unit. And these are platforms equipped with both hyperspectral camera in the visible and near infrared portion. And this one is a hyperspectral camera in the shortwave infrared. In one of the applications, we have an integrated system that includes both GPS INS unit, which is this one here, plus both the visible near infrared and the shortwave infrared camera. So this is just a closer look of the payload. This is a LiDAR unit. This is the hyperspectral camera in the visible near infrared. This is the RGB camera and the integrated GNSS-INS unit, which is based on the Applanix APX15, is here inside this unit. This is a closer unit, like a closer look at the guts of the system. This is a LiDAR. This is the RGB camera, the hyperspectral camera here. This is the APX GNSS-INS unit here. So you can see it's very, very small. This payload in total, I would say, is not more than 10 pounds, or like I would say 5 kilograms, let's say. So the main message which I'm trying to convey in this talk is that it will be really naive to say that a single sensor or a single platform will be able to provide the information we need to meet the needs of the application. For example, in agriculture or infrastructure monitoring, a single sensor, a single platform is not really the solution. So that's why the research is focusing on taking advantage of the synergistic data you get from these sensors, whether they are variety in the resolutions, variety in the spectral reflectance you get from these sensors. So we have what we call multi-modal or multi-sensor, multi-platform geospatial data acquisition system. So just as an example, if we're talking about urban environments or high level of detail modeling of urban environments, you really need to have an airborne perspective and a ground perspective. So when we are working on this multimodal platform and multi-platform integration, we have some key challenges. We have systems that needs to be calibrated. These systems are equipped with a variety of sensors. Some of them are consumer grades. They are not really designed to be stable or to be structurally sound. You have to worry about the direct georeferencing, the practical aspects of establishing the control to get georeferenced or positional information without really spending too much money on establishing ground control points, or even in environments that you have no luxury of establishing your control. And then the integration or the fusion of this heterogeneous data from different modalities. So as I mentioned, just to highlight this, I will talk about agriculture management and more particularly phenotyping. So I'll just talk about what really we are trying to do in phenotyping. But before that, I will say about agricultural management. So we are really interested in improving the yield from our agricultural resources. So we have requirement for higher yield, and at the same time we have diminishing resources, whether it's like land or water. We would like to have some abilities to predict the crop yield. That's very important for management and planning activities. And at the same time, we are also trying to reduce the impact of the agriculture on the environment. For example, excessive use of nitrogen-based fertilizers or even excessive use of water. And this is something that we would like to avoid. So we can use remote sensing systems on board airborne systems or even ground-based systems to provide important information for agricultural management and precision agriculture. That's what we know. So one of the important factors, especially when it comes to improving the crop yield, is what they call genotype-phenotype correlation. So what is genotype-phenotype correlation? So whenever we talk about genotype, that's a genetic constitution that makes up the individual plant. The phenotype, that's the physical traits or the appearance of the plant as a result of the genotypic traits of the seeds that have been used. So why we are really interested in genotypic or genotype-phenotype correlation? Right now, it's quite affordable to have this gene manipulation, to have seeds with desired characteristics. That, for example, seeds that will increase the crop yield, it will increase the resistance of the plants to drought. You have requirements for less water or less nitrogen-based fertilizers. But the problem here is that you can have actually the genotypes. You have varieties of genes or seeds with different genes generated quite easily. It's quite affordable. However, the problem is that understanding the impact of gene manipulation on the behavior of the plant, or what we call phenotypic trait. So one of them is just basically the biomass, the plant heights, their sort of less response to environmental factors like pests, drought, heat, and so forth. So usually once you have the gene sequencing, you have to do what we call phenotypic to collect data about the plants to understand there is a relationship between the genotypes and the phenotypes. So this phenotyping is usually done on a limited basis, either in greenhouses or in the field at a very limited, I would say, scale. But that's actually does not allow us to do this correlation between the genotypes and phenotypes. So right now, the interest is to do what they call high throughput phenotyping, that you would like to do this mapping or deriving information about the characteristics of the plants at the field scale throughout the entire data. You don't want to do this in a greenhouse because the behavior of the plant in the greenhouse is different from the behavior of the plant in a natural environment in the field. So the concept here of phenotyping or using remote sensing systems is that you have a platform. UAVs is a very good platform for doing that. You can have a variety of sensors, RGB cameras, LIDAR, hyperspectral camera, whether it's in the visible near infrared or shortwave infrared. And from a collection of all these sensors, you have synergistic information about the plants that allows you to derive important information about the behavior of the plant as a result of the varieties of the gene sequences or gene manipulation. In some cases, the UEVs will not give you the data at the resolution you require, so you have more proximal sensing. So this is an example where we are using the PhenoRover, which we developed here at Purdue. You have an RGB camera, you have LiDAR, and you have hyperspectral sensors. So you want to make sure that the data you get from these different sensors are geo-referenced or perfectly aligned in the object space, because the whole idea that you would like to focus at a specific plant with a specific gene, and you would like to get as much information about this plant. And as we said, the RGB by itself will not give you the information you require. The LiDAR by itself will not do this. The visible near infrared or shortwave infrared is not really the only solutions. You have to integrate data from all these sensors and platforms. So the other thing is that the requirement here is that you would like to have this system operational without too much investment in the infrastructure, for example, establishing the ground control points. So one of the target functions is that you'd like to do this at the field scale without establishing control. So that's what we call control-free approach for the alignment of multi-modal and multi-platform data sets. So we'd like to rely on the GNSS, INS units, as well as the system calibration activities. So just to give you an example why this is important. So this is, for example, a row of plant with seeds of different genes that have been tracked throughout the growing season from June 16 all the way to August 16. So you are interested in getting information at the row level, if not at the plant level, throughout the entire growing season. And if you have well georeferenced data, you can even track the individual plants. For example, it's very important here to observe what they call flowering date. So when the plants start to have these reach the flowering stage, that's very important for biomass prediction, for example. So this is an example. I hope that the video will not be too slow. So this is one of the, I would say, seed breeding trials. So you have these rows, each one or two rows, one of these here, they have different genes. So again, you are interested in tracking the development of the growth throughout the season. So here you have a database that has been like orthophotos that have been well georeferenced, and we can track each one of these rows over time. So this happens to be July 25th. Now we are moving to August 8th. You can see here they did some destructive sampling. So they removed this rows here. And this is in August 30th. And in this particular plant, that's sorghum, it grows again after it has been cut. So the whole idea there that for seed breeding trials, they are really interested in getting as much information about the progress of the growth, the flowering dates, the canopy cover, the density of the plants, and that is giving the seed breeders information about what kind of gene sequence is really the one they should be used to develop seeds for planting. So again, I'm repeating myself, so hopefully you don't mind I'm doing that. As we mentioned, you have sensors, you have LiDAR, you have RGB cameras, you have hyperspectral cameras on board unmanned airborne platforms. You have the PhenoRover that gives us very large resolution data. It has LiDAR data, it has RGB camera as well as hyperspectral data. And you would like to be able to link each the plant location in each of these data sets, because that gives you the information from both the ground-based, the proximal-based remote sensing, and the airborne remote sensing. So just to give you an example, in this particular here, this data was collected on June 6, this data was collected in June 11. So between these two different dates, they did some destructive sampling, and those plants here have been removed at June 11. So you can see here the RGB was collected in June 6. The hyperspectral camera was collected in June 14th. The LiDAR data and the UEV data was collected on June 11th. So as an example, you have all these traits that have been collected from multi-sensor or multi-modal, multi-platform data sets. So like for example, from the RGB, you can get the canopy cover, information about the leaf count. You have different indices derived from the hyperspectral data. You have different indices or features derived from the LiDAR data. You feed all these traits into a support vector machine or some type of regression model, and then you can get end of season biomass prediction, just as an example. So just to give you an example why this is important, I'm not going to go through the details here, but the key here is that if you combine data from these variety of platforms, very early in the season, you can make a prediction about the biomass with a 75% accuracy. So again, you cannot really do this relatively good prediction of the end of season biomass without taking advantage of these synergistic characteristics of this multi-sensor, multimodal data sets. So that's really my message here, that, and here that goes beyond agriculture managing, that for lots of applications, we have to have multimodal data sets, RGB, LiDAR, shortwave, infrared, hyperspectral data in the visible and near infrared. You would like to have a variety of scales that cover those features. You would like to have this data acquired at different dates. And in order to do that, you have to use different platforms. So the key part here, that the data you get from all these variabilities or these varieties should be well aligned. Basically, you can, for each feature in the object space, you can get a very high dimensionality feature vector. In order to do that, you have to worry about this calibration and the geo-referencing of the systems, as well as the 3D reconstruction or going from the sensor to the object space. So some of these things are like the calibration is very important. You have to worry about the intrinsic characteristics of the systems, what kind of distortions or the artifacts that could happen during the data acquisition process. You have a variety of sensors. You have a navigation unit, you have an LiDAR unit, you have a camera. You have to map these offsets between them. That's what we call lever arm and bore sight angles between them. You have to worry because again, you have these systems are logged in and they have different time tags. You have to worry about the synchronization errors or time delay errors if they are. And then very important thing here, especially for UEVs, is the stability analysis. Some of these sensors, for example, the camera here, RGB camera, designing the camera to maintain the structural stability or the internal characteristics of the camera is not part of the, I would say, design objectives. Why? Because this camera is designed just to take good images, not designed for photogrammetric application. But this is the camera that we can afford to have on this system here because of payload and even cost constraints. So you have to worry about the stability of these parameters over time. You have to make sure that you have very good quality control procedure to make sure that whatever data you get from these or the information you get from those systems are quite reliable. You have to make sure that the data you get can be visualized in a straightforward manner for the end users. So for example, this concept of this agricultural management, in Geomatics, we are developing the sensors, we are doing the data processing, but at the end, we have a seed breeders who has to look at the information we derived and make a decision which is the seed or gene manipulation is the one to pursue further. And then at the end as well, the feature extraction and the modeling is very important. And again, the requirements for the modeling or feature extraction is application dependent. So I'm not going to go through the equations, but again, like for the reconstruction, you are interested in the position of the features and the objects. You have to get your position and orientation from the GPS INS unit or GNSS INS unit. That allows you to do control-free data acquisition. You have to worry about the lever arm and the bore side between the GNSS INS unit and the LiDAR, between the GNSS INS and the camera, whether it's the RGB camera or the hyperspectral camera. So you have the mathematical model that includes the ground coordinates of the points as function of the sensor measurements, as well as the unknowns, which are for the system calibration, the lever arm and the bore side, which is the spatial and rotational offsets between the GNSS INS and the light. You do the same thing for the camera. You also solve for the lever arm and the bore side, as well as the internal characteristics of the camera, and the same for hyperspectral camera. So the whole idea of the system calibration is that we would like to make sure that we have different modalities, could be LiDAR, could be RGB data, it could be hyperspectral data, and would like to make sure that the data we derive are perfectly aligned. So just for example, you can think that you have a UEV, this is one track, you have the GNSS, you have the LiDAR, you have point cloud, you fly another track, you get another data set, you have your overlapping imagery, you have photogrammetric data, you have another 3D point cloud. If your system is not properly calibrated or georeferenced, you will see here that the data sets we derive from these sensors are not aligned properly. So we have to do the system calibration to make sure that the data set derived from these different modalities, which could be on the same platform or on different platforms, could be collected at the same time or different times. You have to make sure that they are perfectly aligned. And if you happen to have some control information, you have to make sure that this data fits with the control surface so you can refine the system parameters to ensure the alignment of the data from the multiple tracks, from the multiple modalities, the multiple platforms, as well as alignment with the control surface. So this is the current status. That's what we are doing at Purdue. But in general, I would say that's the norm right now. So we have applications, we have needs. So based on the needs, we develop the sensors, the platforms. So these are the varieties of the sensors and platforms. You have to worry about the system calibration, the spatial rotational offsets, the time delays between the sensor components. Then you do the reconstruction. Again, when you deal with heterogeneous data captured at different dates, with different modalities, with different scales. In agriculture, one of the big problems there that you have repetitive patterns, all the plants look the same. So how can you deal with these problems using structure from motion? That's another area of work that you have to worry about to get this 3D reconstruction. The data reduction, basically using those georeference products like orthophotos and automatically detecting the plant rows, the individual plants if possible. That's very important. That's so the data analytics or the data processing. And finally, the visualization or taking the outcome from this and making it or presenting it in an easy environment for the end user to make the best decision. That's something that we have to worry about. And the visualization will get more complex as we have a variety of sensors, platforms, and so forth. So now, in the last few minutes, I'd like to talk about why we are, like right now, we have very good systems that give us above canopy data. But in canopy, mapping is very important. So just to give you an example, here we are, this is work we are doing in forestry, and we'd like to get information about the trees as much as possible. So here I'm comparing some point clouds we derived from a UEV mission and some data that we collected from a backpack system. So you can see here that this UEV mission was conducted in March, last month, on March 13. We had 12 tracks. This is from a backpack system. We had a total of 12 tracks as well, but I'm showing only point clouds from LiDAR that is from a single track, which was captured in roughly 85 seconds. So I hope again that the video looks okay. So here on the left, you see the point cloud that was acquired by the LiDAR data from the UEV. And here on the right of the screen, you see the point cloud that has been captured by the backpack system from one track. So you can see, because of the sensor to object distance, you can see that in the amount of detail in the LiDAR data captured by the UEV system is not as rich or is not as detailed as what we see from the backpack system. So in forestry application, again, they are trying to do something similar to crop management, is that they would like to study the relationship between the genetic characteristics of the trees as well as their behavior. And for example, in this case, their ability, for example, to produce wood or timber, or for example, their ability to resist drought or pests. So the concept here that there is, even we have very good data from UEV systems, but you still, for some applications, you need much higher level of detail. This is the same concept again, but this is for crops. So here we have maize, we have data from UEV systems, we have from the PhenoRover, and we have the UGV system is driving inside the rows. So you can see here again, you have the point clouds coming from the unmanned ground vehicle, the point clouds coming from the PhenoRover and the UEV. So the obvious thing that hopefully you can see in the video, that the UEV is giving us information about the plant heights, but details about the structure of the plants is not really there. The PhenoRover, the high clearance tractor, because it's driving inside the field, we have very good, like a very close proximity between the sensors and the ground. That gives us good data. The UGV is giving the best data. But you can say that, oh, maybe the PhenoRover is as good as the UGV. But I'll remind you again, this sensor was like 30, or at least this platform, we're talking about $35,000. Here we're talking about $250,000. So is there actually a benefit here using this one over this one? Definitely not. The in-canopy one gives us the same level of information. Another problem, because this system here has to drive in the field, usually that disturbs your experiment. You have a heavy sensor, you have soil compaction. So that's, again, that will not be considered as basically you're having plants in natural environment. This is a very light sensor, can even drive in muddy conditions. That would not be an issue. So just to give you an example, again, I'm showing here that this is the UEV data in forest environment. This is the backpack data in forest environment. You can see here much higher level of detail. Again, you will see here that the UGV is providing really high level of detail. You can see nicely the individual plants. Even with the PhenoRover, you don't have this level of detail. And from the UEV, you have very sparse points. You see the tops and the ground of the plants. So there is really a solid argument for increasing the level of detail and having what we call in-canopy mapping. So what is the problem in canopy? So whenever you drive the UGV inside the rows, or you have the backpack system, for example, inside the forestry, you have a degradation, you have outages in the GNSS signal. So you can see here that whenever we lose lock with the GNSS signal because of the plants, the accuracy of our reconstruction or our trajectory will be impacted, and that will impact the products we have. So since we are not really using any ground control, we have important reliance or critical reliance on the GNSS to establish the signal. So you can see here that if we lose lock, you can see here we are looking at the compatibility between the UEV data and the UGV data. So here we're looking at the ground. You can capture the ground from both platforms. The UEV is not impacted by GNSS signal outages. The UGV will be impacted. So you can see here, because of the lower quality trajectory of the UGV, you can see an offset here between the ground in the range of 15 centimeters. That's a huge offset. This is another example, again, the backpack system and the UEV system for a transportation corridor, but here we have excessive canopy coverage. So again, the UEV is not impacted by the canopy, by the signal outages, the backpack is. So when you compare the two data sets, you can see that the backpack, we have very good level of detail, much more than what we get from the UEV, but you can see here we have significant offsets in the range of 2.4 meters in the Z, 2 meters in the XY. Here we are seeing 1.25 meters. So again, GNSS loss of outages are quite critical. This is, I'm showing the same example again. You have the UEV point clouds, that's in green. You have the backpack from two different tracks in the field. And if you look closely, actually, you can see that you have several versions of the tree. So again, this is not really a good data. I would like to have all this data in good spatial agreement or coherence. So that's the problem at hand. And I'm trying to emphasize the problem here. We have numbers that shows actually that here you can see that one of the track, we have good compatibility of the backpack with the UEV data, but we have some shifts here. So just because of the time, I'm not going to get into detail, but hopefully the problem is really clear that with this in-canopy systems, whether they are the UGVs or the backpack system, we get very high level of detail, but because of the GNSS signal outages, we suffer because of this loss of lock and deteriorated outages. So one option one might think of is that, okay, if you have an inertial navigation unit or inertial measurement unit, in this case, you can use the IMU to bridge the gaps of the GNSS outages. But just to give you an example here. So this is two systems here, IMU system. One of them is $10,000. And if you lose lock to 60 seconds, which is 1 minute, your accuracy will deteriorate from 1 to 2 centimeters to 35 to 10 centimeters. So, okay, you can say money is not an issue. You raise your investment from $10,000 to $23,000 in 60 seconds. Your deterioration would be from 1 to 2, 17 to 6. So we have actually improvement by doubling or more or less get higher end unit. But you can see here you pay more than twice the cost, but the accuracy still will suffer. And in canopy mapping, it's quite common to have more than 60 seconds. So 60 seconds, that I would say the low end of outages. So investing in better IMU or inertial measurement unit that can bridge the gaps in the GNSS INS signal outages is not really an option. So you have to really use the data. So that's the problem we are trying to address. Can we really use the data we acquired to improve the trajectory and ensure the alignment of the data? The answer is yes. And that's a problem. So again, you can see here that we have point clouds from two different tracks in the field. And again, because of the signal outages, you can see that you have a variety or ghost, or like I would say, phantom point clouds of the same tree. So how we do this? So you using feature extraction and odometry, whether it's visual odometry or like 3D odometry, you can track individual features over time or over different or across data sets, and you can improve the quality of the trajectory as well as you do the reconstruction or the modeling of your environment, whether they are the plants, or the trees. So in this case, you can use the mathematical model, but before we were mainly focusing on the lever arms and the bore side for the calibration, but now you focus on trajectory enhancement. So you can see here that this is before and this is after. So you can really use those features that have been tracked and you can improve the quality of the data. So I'm not going to go through this here in detail, but just to show you the concept in this case, like for example, in forestry, you can, because we have high level of detail, you can do some detection of the individual trees. So this is just an example here. We are using the high density we get from the LiDAR data to detect the individual trees. So we can detect the individual rows, and along the rows, we can detect the individual trees. So you reconstruct the data, you track the individual trees over time throughout the mission, and you can use the observed discrepancy between these phantom point clouds that correspond to the same tree, and you can improve your trajectory. So this is just an example here of a case where these are the individual trees. So we can use, for example, the trunks of the trees as features, and we say that the trunks of the tree is coming from the same mission at different locations or different platforms to force them to align together by fixing the trajectory. So again, I'm going to skip this one just because of the sake of the time. And what I'm trying to show you here actually is that you can do that, and you can see here, this is the before trajectory enhancement. You can see the data is not as clean as the after trajectory enhancement. So after trajectory enhancement, you get much higher level fidelity data. If you, hopefully the resolution or the streaming is relatively reasonable enough that you can see here that we see phantom point clouds for the trees, you see much cleaner point clouds here in the trees. So to make this a little bit easier to see, this is a single tree first with the original trajectory, and you can see here, because of the GNSS signal outages, you can see that you have several phantom point clouds. Yeah, that here we have the point clouds colored by time. So you can see here that you don't have a well-defined tree. After trajectory enhancement, you can see that the tree is well-defined. You have the features of the trees. You can derive important parameters, whether it's the tree, like the diameter at breast height, the height of the tree, the branching map, the tree form. You can do this very easily now that you have this high level of detail. This is another example. You can see here before the trajectory enhancement, we have a lower quality point cloud, and this is after trajectory enhancement. So one of the things we are doing here is that we are combining data from the UEV. So the UEV, you have less details, but you can see the individual trees, you can see the ground. You use the backpack system or the in-canopy system, which has higher level of detail, but it has lower geopositional accuracy. By combining the two together, you can really ensure the quality of the trajectory of the backpack data, which is a high level of detail, and you ensure its alignment with the UEV data. So this is what I'm showing here. Here I'm showing the UEV data in green, the point cloud from two different tracks, the backpack here, before the trajectory enhancement and after trajectory enhancement. So I'll just give you maybe a few seconds to look at this one here to appreciate the improvement of the point clouds or the trajectory after using the UEV data to help the geo-referencing of the in-canopy data. So this is the same concept again. You cannot really say that the backpack data, which is very high level of detail, is sufficient. Definitely it is not. You have different perspective. The UEV gives you another perspective, and even the UEV can give you information to help in the positioning of the backpack data. So this is my last slide. I would like to say that mobile mapping systems technology is quite mature, the term mobile mapping system is more than 35 years old. It was developed in Ohio State University at the University of Calgary in 1985, mid 80s. We have commercially available systems right now. The problem with those systems that are based on either manned aircraft or wheel systems, they are relatively expensive. They are not easily deployed. Because of the developments both in the sensing and the platform technologies, we have the UEVs, we have the UGVs, we have very good systems, easily deployed, relatively not as expensive as manned systems, and they can give us the data that allow us to diverge to more applications. One of the applications I mentioned here in this talk was the genotype-phenotype correlation. But there are lots of challenges. System calibration, by having these miniaturized units, you have to worry about the system calibration, worry about the stability of the systems. Again, as I mentioned towards the end, when you get into GNSS, challenging environments, whether you have intermittent access or full denial of the signal, you have to really do something to improve the quality of the trajectory to have very good positional accuracy. So thank you for your attention. I'd like to acknowledge the different agencies that provided funding, which allow to do this work. And I'll be glad to answer any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. We are indeed grateful to you for such a detailed presentation. And we have a couple of questions. The first question is from Walton Yilmaz, and he asks, first of all, he is thanking you for the presentation. And he says that as far as I can see, the ground device-based systems provide point clouds of quite high detail, which is good at a first glance. I would like to know if this type of data is not harder to handle compared to a standard UAV-based point cloud.
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. I mean, again, you get more data, it will be like I would say, you have to worry about the storage data, the management of the data will become more tricky. So it's like, I mean, you have to pay it to what you get. You have the UEV data, you have sparse data, but when you get more higher level of detailed data, you have to really make sure that you can have better tools to manage the data and do the data reduction. But the key part here is that once you have this high level of detailed data, you don't, once you did the initial processing, for example, you did in this particular application, all what we are really interested in having the information about the diameter of the tree at the breast height, would like to get the branching map, you would like to get information about the tree form. So once you derive this information, then you can store the original data and then you don't need to carry it. So the expense of managing this large volume of data will just reduce as you increase the level of, I would say, the semantic in the data, you extract the data that you require. Hopefully I answered the question.
Thank you, sir. The next question is by SKP Kushwaha. How to improvise segmentation accuracy of individual trees where the branches and canopy are intermixed?
That's a very important question. So, I mean, like here, actually, like we can get the individual trees, and the way I would say that the way I presented this one, I did not go to this level of detail, is that you know that the tree trunks, so this is where we start, and then we divide actually the tree. We say that like halfway between the trunks, that's the separation between the two trees. And you are definitely correct. You have a situation where the trees actually will branch together. So like we need to be very careful how do you do this, but the way we, like, this is just, I'm saying this is a concept here, that because, like, for example, this one here, you can start from the trunk, and through this branching map, by doing some sort of tracking, you can even see actually if there are some of the branches from this tree have been segmented with other tree, you can do this by doing the tracking. But the problem here is that you have to make sure that the data is properly georeferenced to allow you to track the features from each point cloud starting from the trunk of the tree and then moving upward.
Thank you, sir. There's another question. How to integrate the UAV point cloud and mobile LiDAR when we cannot take any ground control points under dense canopy?
Okay, that's a very good question. I have to apologize that maybe I missed, like I went quickly through this part here, but let me just to give you the concept here. And that's why I would say one of the most important things here about the geomatics engineering is that because we understand, as I said, like what we are doing is that you develop the system, you understand the point positioning equation. So for example, if you look at this one here, so for this particular point here coming from camera or coming from LiDAR, you know the point positioning equation that's associated with this one here. So one of the things we do actually is that we have a point positioning equation. I'll talk about LiDAR. So you have this point here, you have the ground coordinates as function of the GPS INS position and the orientation, the lever arm and the bore side, and the LiDAR range and pointing direction measurements. So it doesn't matter actually whether this point is coming from the airborne system or the ground-based system. You have all the information that allows you to know that this point here is coming from a sensor and it belongs to a sensor tree. So the way we do it actually is that we say that for this given tree, we have 10,000 points, 5,000 coming from the UEV, 5,000 coming from the UGV or the backpack system. They are merged together in a single adjustment. And in this case, we say that the UEV trajectory is quite reliable and the unknowns or the parameters we would like to refine are the trajectory parameters for the UGV system. So by having this transparency or knowing the relationship between the point, where is the sensor it's coming from, the metadata associated with the sensor, whether it's the calibration parameters or the trajectory, you can combine them in a unified adjustment to solve for the unknowns which we are looking for. And in our case, the unknowns could be the system calibration parameters, it could be the trajectory, or even the feature parameters. So part of our reconstruction, we say that after you combine this data, we get the diameter of the trunk of the tree.
Thank you, sir. This question was also asked by the same questioner, that is SKP Kushwaha. And I hope, sir, if there are any other questions which come up to us, you'll be able to, they can contact you personally by mail.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, sir, for your presentation and for answering our questions.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'll take this session offline now.
Thank you.